Let's move on to the next trigger, which is the fourth trigger called as the event grid trigger. So whenever an event is emitted in the Azure environment, could be through an Azure resource or a third party or a custom trigger, you can have this event trigger respond to those events. So if you look at the code, the event grid trigger, it's a pretty simple setup. So again, we'll start with the function attribute. The name of the function is called process event in this case. And you have this event grid trigger mentioned over here. So this function can be triggered only by event grid trigger. And then we also have specified the output binding in this case. The output binding is event grid output. So here we mentioned the topic endpoint. So event grid needs to have a topic and key setting mentioned along with what events you want to process in the output of the event grid output. So these are the three key things that the Azure runtime needs in order for it to send the processed events to the output binding specified over here. And then you obviously have the function execution context, which is created by the Azure function runtime. In case of processing or the custom logic, we have very simple. We have that object, we add some data onto it, we enrich the data onto it, and we send it or forward the enriched data back to the destination event grid, which is specified by these parameters in the event grid output binding. So that's all we do in case of receiving an event from the event grid trigger. The function runtime takes care of waking up the function. Through the trigger, it binds the input event to this particular object, and the type is event grid event. Then you have your logic receiving this input, doing some processing or enrichment, and then finally sending it back to the output events, which is wired back to the event grid specified by this particular URI, topic key setting, and what data you're writing to the destination event grid. So it's pretty simple function, event grid trigger. So if we want to visualize it again, so this is how we visualize the event grid trigger. So event grid triggers the Azure function. We have the same code over here, which we saw in the VS Code. So event source could be a storage, or it could be an Azure resource, or it could be any custom event. Then we have the event grid trigger, which wakes up this Azure function. The Azure Functions runtime deserializes the event, it creates the context and the end-to-end wiring. Then we have the input binding, which brings in the event payload through this event grid event. Then you have your function processing logic. Whatever logic you want to do, you basically write code for that here. That's your only job. The rest is taken care by the output binding and the Azure Functions runtime behind the scenes. So that's the event grid trigger.